the Israelites moved to Egypt. You know, there's some question, you know, there could be some question in our thoughts today. Was it the right thing to go to Egypt? You know, that might be one of the things that we might question. You know, was that the right thing for Jacob and his sons to go down to Egypt? Because, you know, God promised Canaan, or God promised Abraham and Isaac, Canaan land was going to be the land that they were going to inherit there, and that's where they were living. Abraham moved to that country and was there, and then Isaac came up after him and lived in that part of the country. And then Jacob comes along, and Jacob inherits that country there. But then then it comes to a point where Jacob moves to Egypt. Is that the right thing to do? Well, we might run into that before the lesson is over, whether that's the right thing to do or not. The title of our lesson is The Israelites Moved to Egypt. Who are the Israelites? Well, usually it's a person or a place called Israel, and it's the people of that person or place. And if we will remember, God changed Jacob's name to Israel. That was found in Genesis 35:10. And God said unto him, talking about Jacob, thy name is Jacob. Thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he's called his name Israel. And so this is the descendants of Jacob, which is called Israel now. And so and he had, Jacob, Israel, had 12 sons, and so this is the group that is going to be moving then to Egypt. In our memory verse, let's look at our memory verse. Blessed be the Lord, who daily loadeth us with benefits, even the God of our salvation. Blessed is the Lord. You know, as we live our life, we can always be happy in the Lord because of the benefits that He gives us, of the blessings that He gives us. I never will forget the time that I was just a child, and my aunt was sitting there, and she was just kind of being real quiet and everything, and I said, what's wrong? Oh, nothing, she says. I'm just counting my blessings. And you know, it's nice to just sit down sometime and just count your blessings of what God has done for us, and to think back, and we don't have to go very far back to even think about our many blessings that God has given unto us, that we need to thank the Lord for that. Because sometimes we might think that, well, you know, this was a blessing that God gave me, but then if it wasn't a blessing that God gave me, if it would have turned out another way, then it would be a trial and a tribulation, you know, that come upon us. And so we can be very happy. Blessed be the Lord, who daily loadeth us with benefits, even the God of our salvation. And you know, our mind goes back to the time that we did get saved, and that's a blessing that none of us can deny. Salvation. And my first thoughts is, why did God love me so much that he wanted to save me? You know, that's kind of the first question that enters my mind. Why did God love me? Somebody that deserved nothing, but God loved us and took care of. It's because of him being our Father and wanting to see the good for us. You know, no father wants to see his children go through trials and tribulations and temptations and rough times and all. All good fathers wants to see their children prosper as he would want himself to prosper. I'm going to read the junior emphasis. Jacob and his family moved to Egypt. Pharaoh gives them some of the best land in Egypt. They will live in Egypt for many years. But his descendants will eventually return to Canaan. All of this is part of God's plan. If you will look at your emphasis there, and look at that last sentence in that emphasis there. Jacob's body will be carried back then. I think that's supposed to be Joseph's body. It's supposed to be. I think that's a misprint, isn't it?
Well, no, Jacob died in Egypt and they didn't carry his body.
They took it back right away.
But when the Israelites were set free from captivity in Egypt 400 years later,
that's when they took Joseph. And I was thinking that was what he was talking about here.
Well, Jacob lived
147 years.
Yeah,
17 years after he moved down there.
So he lived there for 17 years.
So,
well, kind of the language, the way that statement is presented there, it does seem more logical for Joseph's body, but still the fact is Jacob's body was taken.
Either or, both of them was not left in Egypt.
Right.
Let's put it that way. Okay.
That works.
Okay. All right. We'll do it that way there. All right. Let's look at this Genesis 46:1. And Israel, which is Jacob, took his journey with all that he had. Okay, Father, Joseph says, bring your family, bring father, bring dad, come on down. And I'm going to give you this land down here called Goshen, which is a part of Egypt, is what it is. And so that's what they do. He sent the wagons back, and he told them, he says, I'll even send provisions for you here to come on down. I want y'all to come down and live down here. And Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba. Is that how you pronounce that? And offered sacrifices unto the God of his father Isaac, whose grandfather then was Abraham. Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob. Jacob is still looking to God for his leading and guidance. I can't express it enough. We need to do that each and every day. Jacob, before Jacob leaves Canaan, he wants to stop here at Beersheba. Why does he want to stop at Beersheba? Something must have interacted with his mind that I need to stop off here. Did he have an altar? Had he ever had an altar built here at Beersheba? I can't think of any, but there might have been. But I can't think of any that there was. But this was where he had an impression to stop off and offer God sacrifices before he goes completely down there.
Beersheba was at the southern border of Canaan land.
Okay.
So he was leaving the promised land and going into the Sinai Peninsula and then across over to Egypt. So it was a memorial for his leaving the land that had been promised to Abraham.
I kind of noticed that it was south, a little bit south and east of Gaza. Am I saying that right? Gaza. It's definitely south of Jerusalem and Bethlehem and all. So yeah, before he leaves, he says, we're going to stop off here for a while. And God spake, now verse 2, and God spake unto Israel in the visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here am I. And he said, I am God, the God of thy father. Isaac is who he's talking about. The God of his father, who was Abraham. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation. All right, let's stop right there. He hears a voice. He has a vision. Well, I don't know if it was a dream, if it was a vision that he saw or what it was, but anyhow, something's got his attention. And you know, when God wants to get a hold of our attention, he can. He's going to get our attention sometimes. And you know, how are we responding to the attention that God has in us? How do we respond when we try to give God our attention? How do we respond? But anyway, God says, Jacob, Jacob. And what does Jacob say? Here am I. And God says, I am God, the God of thy father. Now, does what our father has done before, does that give us any respect towards God? Not necessarily, because each and every one of us has to live according to what God has in each and every one of our own lives. You know, our father could be Paul. You know, like Paul that wrote the epistles. You know, but you know, if we don't live for God, we're going to be just as lost as anybody else is. So, you know, but he's recognizing that what he's saying here, talking about father, don't you remember the covenant I gave to your father, Isaac, that you're going to inherit this land? Don't you remember the covenant that I had with your grandfather, that you're going to inherit this land? And so I'm that same God. I'm that same God, is what he's saying. And he says, fear not to go down to Egypt. My question was it the right thing to do was to go to Egypt? Well, if God tells you to fear not to go down to Egypt, then it sounds like it's the right thing to do. So I think our question's already been answered there. For I will there make of thee a great nation. God had already promised that to Abraham. You know, and Abraham had to wait a long time to see that promise, because there was no potential to even have a little bitty nation, because he didn't have any children, remember? But Abraham continued to trust and continued to trust and continued to trust, and finally Isaac was born. After he was 100 years old practically, and I think Sarah was about 90 years old, finally they had that child, Isaac. And Isaac grew up then, and then Isaac had 2 children. Oh boy, that's an awful slow start. 1 child and then 2 children, the next generation, and then finally Jacob had 12 sons then to carry on. But you know, in God's time, things happen. If God promises it, if God makes a covenant with you, it's going to take place. Now, I ain't saying it's going to take place immediately. I won't say that, but it will take place. God never goes back on his word there. And he says, for I will there make of thee a great nation. And you know, this nation, if we will kind of scan ahead, this nation took time and time. You know, it took lots of time. We look at it, what was it, 400 years that they were down there in Egypt? From this time to the time that Moses gathers them up and moves them out. 400 years. Now, how many people was alive when they walked out of there? How many of the people that we're studying about here was alive at that time when they took out? I don't think any of them, was they? They'd had to have been over 400 years old to be able to do that. Not a one of them. Not a one of them seen it with their literal eyes. But they had to trust in God that that was going to happen. For I will there make of thee a great nation. Verse 4, and I will go down with thee into Egypt. Oh, wouldn't that be such refreshing words? When God told Jacob, I will be with thee down there in Egypt. Well, I'm an old man. You know, he's 130 years old at this time. He's an old man, but God's still interested in him. You know, it don't matter how old we get. You know, a lot of us consider ourselves old. And I'm not the oldest one in the congregation. There's other people that's older than I am here in the congregation. But, you know, God still is concerned with each and every one of you, no matter how old you are. You know, if you live to be 100, or if you live to be more than that even, God's still interested in you. He just don't throw you out like a dirty rag, you know. He's interested in you. And you know, this is one of the best blessings that I think Jacob could ever. This might have been one of his best blessings he got in his whole lifetime. Whole entire life. I will go down with thee into Egypt. Okay, Lord, I want to go down there, but I want you to be with me. Yeah, and that's the same way we are each and every day. You know, as I go out and cook at Freedom School, Lord, I want you to be with me that day. You know, as y'all go out and teach, or wherever you go shopping, or wherever you go, Lord, I want you to go with me. Because I don't know what I'm going to run into, but you do. You already got the day planned. You already seen what today's going to be, what it's going to bring. I have no idea what I'm going to run into, but you do. And that's the same way Jacob was here. I don't know what we're going to run into down here, but Lord, I'm leaving it all up to you. If you go along with me, which you said you're going to be along with me, then it's all in your hands. It's all in your hands. I will also surely bring thee up again, and Joseph shall put his hand upon thy eyes. Okay, here's a promise. He says, I'm going to bring you back up again. Did he? It was when he died, and they carried his body back up there. But, you know, that wasn't completely what he was talking about. He's talking about the whole family, the whole nation of Israel is what he's talking about here. Now, Jacob might have taken, well, yeah, maybe it's me. Maybe in 5-6 years, well, maybe I'll come back. But no, that was, God had a bigger picture in mind. Amen. Is what he had. He had the whole picture. You know, we kind of stand back and we'll kind of look and we'll make that statement. Well, I've got the big picture in mind, you know, and of course that big picture is kind of a small picture to God, you know, but it's big to us because we're kind of thinking about it in the future and all that. But here was the big picture right here. It's going to take 400 years. It's going to take 400 years before that takes place. But you know, God's true to His Word. He's true to His Word. And He says here, and I will also surely bring thee up again. I'm going to read here verses 5, 6, and 7. It's not in your quarterly there, but I'm going to read it. And after verse 4, it says, and Jacob rose up from Beersheba. That's where he offered his sacrifices. That's where he got this commandment of God. There's where he got his blessing from God, his assurance from God. And I don't know how many other adjectives we could put on that, but you know, Jacob had things settled here at Beersheba. Okay. It's the right thing to do. God said He's going to go with me. God said to go down there. God says He's going to be with me. He's going to take care of. Okay, That's what we're going to do. And so he rose up from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father and their little ones and their wives in the wagons which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. Verse 6, and they took their cattle and their goods which they had gotten in the land of Canaan, and came unto Egypt, Jacob and all his seed with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters. In other words, he's talking about his grandchildren is what he's talking about. And all his seed brought he with him unto Egypt. So he got his sons and he's got his grandchildren. He loaded them all up in these wagons and says, fellas, family, maybe I should say family, we're going to Egypt. We're going to Egypt. Why? Because there's a drought here, and if we stay up here, we're going to die off. You know, God uses material things to get his will accomplished a lot of times. He uses the material thing. He don't go plumb out of the spectrum to get his will to have his will accomplished, you know. He uses exactly what's there. You know, God is so smart that he can do things like that. You know, my little old mind, you know, you would think, well, you know, how could he use this to be able to accomplish his will? But he does. And you know, and as we read this, you know, you think, boy, they sold Joseph off to Egypt, you know. Well, why? You know, how is that God's will? Well, you know, that's what have been trying to explain through this whole quarterly. That, you know, that's our thought. How can that be God's will? But, you know, as things fall in line, you know, oh yeah, that's part of God's will. Yeah, that's part of God's will. Yeah, if we jump the gun, well, we're going to be in trouble. Or if we drag our feet, we're going to be in trouble. But it's only at God's time that he does that. But Jacob got his family and his goods and his cattle, and he's heading out of the land of Canaan into Egypt. And he's got the blessing from God to go down there. There at Beersheba. God spoke to Jacob that night. He told him not to be afraid to go to Egypt. He would make of Jacob a great nation, Israel. If we will look back and think now, you know, talking about Jacob being a great nation, you know, and we may not know exactly that his name was changed, and we think, well, Jacob, I've never heard of the nation Jacob, but you know, everybody's heard of the nation Israel, you know, and because God had changed his name, he would go with him to Egypt and would bring him back again. What wonderful promises. If God goes with you everywhere, everything will be all right. If God goes with you, and we just can't force God to go with us. We can't force God to go with us, because if we step out of bounds, then God's not with us. And you know, that's what Jacob done here. He says, am I fixing to step out of bounds here? You know, if you're playing ball or something, football or basketball, you know, there's boundary lines there, you know, and if you step out of bounds, if you step over that line, the play stops right there, doesn't it? Yeah. They don't let the play keep on going, you know. Hey, you're out of bounds. You're done right there. Well, that's the same way it is in our Christian race. If we step out of bounds, we're stopped right there, you know. Oh yeah, we can run out of bounds, keep on going, really think we're doing something, you know. But the play stopped right there. And you know, we have to come back to where we were and get right with God and be able to be back into the ball game again. But you know, he wanted to make sure that everything was all right here. You know, Jacob, you know, Jacob was kind of a trick, played a lot of tricks and everything, you know, and we sometimes wonder, you know, why did this happen and all. But you know, when it come down to it, he was sincere with God, and you know, God rewarded him for that. If God goes with you, everything will be all right. We have him. To have him, let me start that over. To have him, to have God, we must obey him. If we disobey God, we might think we have him, but there's a difference between having him and thinking we have him.
Amen.
You know, saying so. You know, if you're out in a desert, you know, and you look up ahead and you're really thirsty, and you look up ahead and you see, man, it looks like a big old lake up there. And, oh, yeah, that's fine, you know. Well, when you get up there, it's just more sand, you know. What good is that going to do you? It's a mirage. And, you know, that's a lot of times what people are living on is mirages, you know. And so we have to have him in order to obey him. We must obey him in order to have him. And we have to realize that. The Israelites went on to Egypt. I'm going to read, let's skip on down. Your quarterly picks up at 29, but I'm going to read the verse right ahead of that, 28. Because from verse 8 to 28, it lists all the people's name that went down there is what that is. And I would have to have somebody else to read all that, so I'm not going to do that. So let's pick up on verse 28. And he sent Judah before him unto Joseph to direct his face unto Goshen, and they came unto the land of Goshen. Judah. Why did he pick Judah? Now that's the question I'm asking. Why did he pick Judah? Judah wasn't the firstborn. Reuben was the firstborn. And then there was two in between him and Judah, which was Simeon and Levi, I believe. And now Judah, I think, is the fourthborn. Why did he pick Judah? Does anybody have an answer? I don't.
Well, there's several. Judah was the one who came up with the idea of selling Joseph.
Okay.
And killing him.
Okay.
Okay.
Kind of a go-between Joseph and his brothers.
And it's kind of one of the reasons they're now coming to Egypt.
Uh-huh.
Number two, when they came back from Egypt, Judah was the one who pledged collateral for taking Benjamin down there.
Okay.
Number three, when they were before Joseph, it was Judah that made the big confession.
Okay.
Okay. And number four, looking forward in time, Messiah, it kind of came from the tribe of Judah. And so since Judah is leading God's people, it's figurative in many ways of Christ leading his church.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, I know that the other three boys had committed sins in different ways. If you're interested in that, well, just read that for yourself. But the other two had committed sin. But Judah was not quite so righteous as himself either. So, you know, just kind of look at that sometimes. And so, you know, I thought, well, you know, them other three boys committed sin. Well, Judah also committed sin also. And I'm gonna just leave it at that, but that's not part of our lesson. But anyway, Judah was the chosen tribe that brought our Messiah to us. It was out of the tribe of Judah that Jesus was born. It sure was. And again, that was not the firstborn. We sometimes wonder, well, why was that? Well, God has his his reasons why. Judah here is the one that was picked to go down there. You go down there and show us where we're supposed to go. You get the information from Joseph and show us where we're supposed to go. And so that's what's happened here, and directed them to Goshen. Verse 29 now. And Joseph made ready his chariot. Now this is Joseph, the one that's already down there. This clock's the one that's right in. And Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet Israel his father to Goshen, and presented himself unto him, and he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. I think that good means a long period of time. I believe what that means. A good long period of time. It had been 22 years since Joseph had seen his dad, or somewhere in that length of time. 20 to 25. Let's do it that way. 20 to 20. A score to a quarter of a century. Let's put it that way. But it had been a long time. It had been a long time. When Joseph finally saw his father, it was a great reunion. It was a great reunion. Let's look at that verse 30. And Israel said unto Joseph, after he had wept on his shoulder, wept on his neck, realized who he really was hugging there. He says, and Israel said unto Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive. What does that show? What does them words right there show? It shows love for one another. It shows a mighty love that a father has for his child, thinking for 20-something years that his child's dead, and now all of a sudden he's alive. 20-something years was taken out of their life of being together, but it was all for God's purpose. You know, sometimes we might think that, whoa, man, we sacrifice a whole lot. You know, we sacrifice this and we sacrifice that, but you know, Joseph sacrificed 20-something years, you know, of not being with his father. But you know, it was all worth it. Joseph can look at it and he can say, you know, yes, I gave up 20-something years with my father, but you know, I preserved the family. God used me. It wasn't he preserved the family, but God used him to preserve the children of Israel. And that's way more important than missing a few years with my father, or missing quite a few years, or maybe I should say missing a lot of years with my father. It still was worth it. Joseph had love for his father. Why? Because he was the spoiled little brat? You know, you might say. No, it wasn't that. Yes, he was spoiled. Yes, Joseph was kind of the spoiled little feller, you know. But no, and how Joseph used being spoiled like that to God's glory and kept it all in sync together. Now, could I have done that? I don't know if I could have done that, you know. Because nature, it's nature for a person that is spoiled to stay that way. But I don't think Joseph wasn't that way. Joseph used that and kept all his ducks in a row, with God being up there first and following after God.
Yeah, I think Joseph recognized some similarity between himself and his father in their experiences. You recall that Jacob was in the land of Haran and had been abused by his father-in-law, his uncle, you know, changing his wages and all these things, the hardships that he went through for the family. And Joseph would have seen the latter days of that, but then now here he was in Egypt, he went through hardships,
Mm-hmm.
and for the preservation of the family as well. So all the brothers, all the sons of Jacob, he and Joseph had a great deal in common in that kind of experience
Mm-hmm.
that the brothers didn't have.
Jacob kind of brought all this trickery stuff and wages and even didn't even get the wife that he had courted. That was even a trick, but that was all kind of brought on himself because of the way he acted. Joseph was kind of different in that. It was because he was forced into that, wasn't it? And so, but Joseph had no ill will because of it.
No.
Yeah, no ill will whatsoever. Did you have something else?
Well, Jacob, in the latter years with his father, he caused the flocks to grow, and then Laban would take them back.
Uh-huh.
And then he'd do it again, and Laban would take it back.
Uh-huh.
And here Joseph was, he worked for Potiphar, ended up in jail. Now he's working in jail, helps the butler get free, and that gets taken away from him. So, those things are very similar
Uh-huh.
in the impact on their lives.
Right. Yep. Okay, let me try and read these verses that's not in your quarterly after 30, 31, and down to 34. I'll read them. And Joseph said unto his brother and to his father's house, I will go up and show Pharaoh and say unto him, my brethren and my father's house, which were in the land of Canaan, are coming to me. He had already told them, he says they're going to move down here. And that's when Pharaoh said, okay, well, send them some wagons so they can get them down here. Well, now a time has come, and now here they are. And so that's what Joseph, out of the respect of Pharaoh, is going to let Pharaoh know that they are here. He's not just going to take it upon himself and say, oh yeah, you can go into the land of Goshen. No, he says, I'm going to take you to Pharaoh then. And the men are shepherds, for their trade has been to feed cattle, and they that brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. And it came to pass when Pharaoh shall call you and shall say, what is your occupation? That ye shall say, thy servant's trade has been about cattle from our youth even until now, both we and also our fathers, that ye may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. But I'm sure they probably like to eat it, though, you know it. But anyway, this is what Joseph has been down there enough to know what the customs of Egypt are. And he says, we have to be careful here on this, We're going to have to let him know that you all are cattle raisers, you're cattle men. And so, what are we going to do here? The land of Goshen is, I think, in the eastern part of Egypt. Northeast. Yeah, it's clear in the north, and then in the eastern part there. That was good land. Wasn't that the mouth of the Nile River in that area? Well, isn't that pretty fertile land, Dan? And so, Joseph says that's a good place for you guys, is there. Because the grass grows good, and it'll be for your cattle and everything. That'll be a good place. Joseph had it figured out what would be the best for the family. God showed him this. God showed him this, that's a good place. Jacob gives them advice. And I read somewhere where 5 of the boys went down, and it may be in our lesson yet, but 5 of the boys went down, but Judah was the one that Joseph meets with. Joseph meets with the with them and gets them prepared of what needs to be done. Let's go then to Genesis 47:1. Then Joseph came and told Pharaoh and said, "My father and my brethren, and their flocks and their herds, and all that they have are come out of the land of Canaan. Behold, they are in the land of Goshen." And he took some of his brethren, even 5 men, there it is, 5 of his brothers, and presented them unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto his brother, "What is your occupation?" Joseph kind of had an idea that question was going to come up. And that's what he had already prepared his brothers about. And they said unto Pharaoh, "Thy servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers." Okay, so here's what Joseph had already in his mind prepared his brothers of doing then. And he had 5 of his brothers. He didn't have all 10 of them. Wonder why that was that way. Can you imagine bringing in all 10 or 11 of those brothers into there? It'd be a little bit overwhelming. I was thinking the same thing. So he picks out 5 of them then and says, you know, here is some of my brothers, and then he asks what their occupation. Well, it's being shepherds. And you know, Goshen was away from the capital of Egypt there. They would be kind of out in the country, you know, away. If being the occupation of shepherd was an abomination, then Joseph kind of had prepared in his mind, we'll just leave them out there in the countryside, and you know, they can raise the cattle and the sheep and everything, and that would be a good place for them. Don't you think?
Who wants a hog farm right next to their house?
Right next to the palace. Yeah.
I think maybe you can understand.
Yes, I can. And so that's what was going on here. I'm going to read verses 4, 5, and 6. They said, "Moreover unto Pharaoh, for to sojourn in the land are we come, for thy servants have no pasture for their flocks, for the famine is sore in the land of Canaan. Now therefore we pray thee, let thy servants dwell in the land of Goshen." And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, "Thy father and thy brethren are coming to thee." Verse 6, "And the land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land make thy father and thy brethren to dwell. In the land of Goshen let them dwell." Can't you just think of Joseph? Okay, that's kind of what I thought he was going to say, but I had to get the word from him first. Well, God's working, you know. Joseph probably thought, well, God's working there. "And if thou knowest any men of activity among them, then make them rulers over my cattle." Did you hear what Pharaoh said? My cattle. So evidently they must like beef. For some reason, they must have liked beef. And because Pharaoh had cattle, you know. But he didn't like the people that raised those cattle, did he? But anyway, he had them cattle. Verse 7, which is in your quarterly. "And Joseph brought in Jacob his father, and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh." Now, was that the right thing to do? Well, they're guests. They're guests here at this land, you know. Yes, we're going to follow God, and we're going to hope that the ruler of this nation follows God like he's supposed to. So Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Well, did that catch Pharaoh's attention? Let's look at verses, and it's not in your quarterly, 8, 9, and 10. "And Pharaoh said unto Jacob, How old art thou?" You know, is that a common phrase? You know, well, yeah, you have to watch who you talk to. Most men, a lot of times, don't want to ask a woman, you know, how old they are, but you know, that might interfere with people. But you know, how old are you is what he's saying. He recognized that he was an older man. And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, the days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. 130 years old is how old he was. Few and evil have the days of my life been, and have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out before Pharaoh. Now remember, he's 130 years when he moved down here. He's 130 years old. And so Jacob, I'm running a little bit over here. Let's look at verse 11. And Jacob placed his father, and Joseph placed his father and his brethren, and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of land, in the land of, and I can't pronounce that word, or say that.
I think it's Ramesses.
Okay, as Pharaoh had commanded. Now these are the kings of Pharaoh, kings of Egypt is what that word that Sister Bayless just pronounced. It's the kings of that were there. And so now they've got the land. And Joseph nourished his father and his brother and all his father's household with bread according to their family. And there was no bread. I'm reading verse 12, 13, and 14. That's not in accordingly. And there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the corn which they had brought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. And then after that, he more or less got all the land and everything for Pharaoh. And then as time went on, he used that money, and then he rented that land out to the people then after the famine was over with then, and he rented that land out. Don't you think that was a smart thing for Joseph to do for Pharaoh? Because Pharaoh was all in favor of that, and that's what was going on here. Joseph was a witty person because of being able to follow God, and so you know that's what had happened. Let's go on and read I'm going to read verse 27 through 31, and that'll kind of finish up that chapter then. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt. Yeah, and Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they had possessions therein, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. Remember, God told him, said he's going to make a great nation out of him. And there was 70 souls that came down to Egypt. Remember that, 70 souls. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. Jacob. Did I say Jacob? And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. Now remember, he's 130. So what's 130 and 17? That equals about 147, doesn't it? Okay. So the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. And the time drew nigh that Israel must die. And he called his son Joseph and said unto him, If now I have found grace in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and deal kindly and truly with me. Bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt. Now he's making a promise here. He's wanting Joseph to make a promise that he's not going to leave him here. Why? Well, because his wife is up there. Rachel's up there. His father's up there. His grandfather's up there. That's what he's saying. I want to be buried up there because God said he's going to bring us out of here. Yeah, so I want to be buried up there. But I will lie with my fathers, and thou shalt carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place. And he said, I will do as thou hast said. That's what Joseph said. Love between Joseph and his son. Joseph and his father, and Jacob and his son, Joseph. That was the love. I can trust Joseph. Now these other guys, I don't know. They've led me to believe a lot of stuff, you know. And I don't know if I can trust them, but I can trust Joseph, is what he's saying. And he said, swear unto me. And he sware unto him. And Israel bowed himself upon the bed's head. Now that doesn't mean he died yet. That means he was not a well man, is the way I take that. So I'm going to quit with that. And our next lesson will be Jacob's burial